I'm a sucker for a good ancient mystery, so when I heard about the puzzle of the Pictish glyphs, I was all over it. The Picts were a people living in eastern and northern Scotland in the early medieval period, and they had a set of glyphs which they inscribed on standing stones as well as other objects. The repetition of the same distinctive and unique patterns again and again indicates that they clearly had some significance, but no one's been able to come up with a halfway decent theory on what this significance was. Hordes of experts and amateurs alike have been flummoxed for centuries, etc., etc. You get the picture. I'm not going to give you the full spiel, you can do the googling. So basically here, I thought, was something I could really get my teeth into. I was up for the quest. Could I be the one to solve it at last? And believe it or not, I think I've done it. I know, yay right! How did I do it? On the scottishportal.com website there's a page on the mystery of the Pictish stones, and it concludes by saying, what would resolve this issue is the discovery of a Rosetta stone where the Pictish symbols are combined with inscriptions in a known language which would finally reveal their hidden meaning. And it's not the first time the need for a Rosetta stone to break the code has been mentioned in the context of these Pictish glyphs. The Rosetta stone, of course, is an Egyptian stone inscribed with the same text in 3 languages, and which thus allowed Egyptian hieroglyphs to be deciphered. When I solved the Pictish mystery, it was indeed by means of a Rosetta stone, and the language that allowed me to work it out was the universal language of geometry. The stone in question even has a similar name to the Rosetta stone. It's called the Rosemarkie stone. The 2 most common and most intriguing Pictish glyphs are the Crescent and V-rods and the double disc and Z-rod. It's really these 2 symbols that represent the core of the mystery. These are the 2 that everyone wants to decipher. So the V-rod and crescent consists of a crescent and 2 rods in a V shape, while perhaps unsurprisingly the Z-rod and double disc consists of rods forming a Z and 2 discs. They often appear together, as here for example. So the way into this mystery is through geometry, and we're going to start here by looking at how to construct the pattern on the Rosemarkie stone using just the tools of the trade, the straight edge and the set of compasses, the only things you're allowed to use as a self-respecting purveyor of sacred geometry. I'm going to start by creating the square at the bottom. You'll notice I'm working up quite a bit of pace here as I use these tools. I wouldn't recommend necessarily trying that at home. Could lead to a nasty accident. Right, there we are. There's the square. And if we first draw in just a few extra lines to define the center and so on, we can then proceed to create the first of our crescents. There we go, there's the shallower curve at the bottom, and then using that as the center point we can draw in the top part of the crescent. Now before we proceed to the next part of the pattern, we need a horizontal line touching the top of the crescent. So to do that we can draw in some diagonals like this, looking at where they intersect the verticals at the side, and there we go. Now we're able to draw in that horizontal. But hold on a second, we've just added the V-rod to the crescent. We've actually just created the V-rod and crescent symbol there without even realizing it. And we could then proceed to add more crescents on top using those horizontal lines. I like to refer to each of these ones as a register. Sounds kind of clever. So there we are, we've added the second register. But we haven't yet said what the significance of this pattern is. We've just constructed it. We have shown that it's a fundamentally geometric beast. So the clue we have so far is that it's all about geometry. It's not pictorial, not figurative symbolism. And it's when we look at it in geometric terms that we find the real significance, because this V-rod and crescent that we've created is actually an illustration of a famous geometric theorem, Hippocrates' theorem of the squaring of the Lune, which I just happen to know about somehow. It's long been a fascinating theory because although there's no purely geometric method for squaring the circle, drawing a square with the same area as a given circle, there is this way to square this type of crescent or lune, and since the crescent is made up of circle sections, that's kind of the next best thing. So let's break out for a moment to take a look at this theorem. Our crescent here is made up of two circle sections. We have this one here, the outer or top part of the crescent, which has its center here, and this is the radius, which we can say is half of the side of the square. And then there is the lower curve of the crescent, which is really a quarter of this larger circle, and the radius of this circle is the diagonal of the square. So in terms of area, area of a circle is pi r squared. So if we're calling this 1, then mathematically the diagonal of the square is the square root of 2. So to get the area, we're squaring it because it's pi r squared, radius squared. Well, 1 times 1 for this radius equals 1, and the square root of 2 squared is 2. So there are two areas compared to each other in the ratio of 1 to 2. So another way to say that, this larger circle is twice the area of this smaller circle. Now that actually allows us to say that these two green areas are equal, because this green area is half of the smaller circle, and the smaller circle itself is half of the larger circle, we've already said, and a half of a half is a quarter, and this is clearly also a quarter of the larger circle because there's 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4. But both these areas contain the same marked off area, so we can show that by making that pink. So if we were to remove the pink area from both, that means we're starting off with something the same area, and we're removing the same area from that, both of those, so the results will also be equal. We've taken the same amount from the two equal things, and that's shown here. So here we have our crescent, here we have our triangle, and we have now proved that they are both the same area. We can move the triangle up here, and then we can go the final stage. This square is also equal to the crescent because it's made up of the two halves of that triangle. It's equal in area to that triangle. We can also go back to our V-rod and crescent now and see that the triangle is delineated by the V, and then behind it there we have the crescent. It's pretty clear then that the glyph doesn't really symbolize anything beyond knowledge of the very geometry that was used to create it. It's an emblem of learning, a badge of skill. I'm a clever person, I get the theorem of Hippocrates, that is its meaning. The theorem may not be much compared to the sorts of things modern mathematicians grapple with, but in early medieval Scotland, in what was surely a largely illiterate Dark Age society, if you knew about this theorem and understood it, you weren't doing too bad. We shouldn't really explore these matters in a complete historical vacuum. The more general question is, was geometry considered important in this region at this time? And the answer to this is yes. Geometry was certainly important for the master mason of the Middle Ages proper, and this didn't come out of nowhere. As early as the 8th century, we have, for example, an Irish commentary on the grammar of Donatus Mayor, which states that God created everything by means of arithmetic and geometry. So geometry had already acquired the status of a noble discipline that could elevate the mind closer to the divine in this period. The more specific question is, could the Picts of the early medieval period have had access to an explanation of Hippocrates' theory of the Lune? This also turns out to be a yes. Essentially, there was this guy called Boethius who wrote works on geometry, including a lost work on the problem of squaring the circle, and it's highly likely this included a discussion of the next best thing, the squaring of the Lune. We know Boethius' works were disseminated across Western Europe in the early medieval period. They could have come to Scotland via the Anglo-Saxons or from Ireland, as Boethius was read in both of these places. Ireland is more likely because we know there was a strong influence from there in Scotland at the time. If you love geometry and like the idea of knowledge from the classical age being passed on into the medieval period, you'll find this solution very satisfying. But if you were hoping for something more sensational, you might be disappointed. To address this, let's see how we can give it a bit more spin. And we'll start by literally giving the V-rod and Crescent some spin. 180 degrees of spin to be precise. Looks a bit like the Freemasonic square and compasses symbol in a way, don't you think? And what does that Freemasonic symbol represent if not the same type of competency, i.e. geometric skill and knowledge? I should also point out straight away that we're clearly dealing here with a Masonic craft with grades or degrees of initiation, with the symbols as marks of attaining those degrees. In some sense, we're talking secret society. So does that float your boat a bit more? It's actually not unreasonable to think in terms of an unbroken chain from an early medieval Protomasonic guild with apprentices learning from a master mason, through the medieval mason guilds of Scotland in the Middle Ages, to the emergence of the first Freemasonic lodges in Scotland. According to Wikipedia, it's been argued that regulated Freemasonry in Scotland is older than in any other part of the British Isles. The connection between the craft of stonemasonry and modern Freemasonry can be readily established in Scotland. This direct connection can be traced from the oldest Masonic written records in the world, which are the property of the Grand Lodge of Scotland in Edinburgh. Not my words, Wikipedia's. So there you go.